Greetings to all friends of Motorsport-Magazin.com and Formula One enthusiasts. What an incredible spectacle we witnessed in Baku. The Grand Prix of Azerbaijan in 2024 was truly remarkable. He did not let us down. Ultimately, it seems that it was not the quicker driver who triumphed, but rather the more skilled one. Oscar Piastri truly succeeded. He completed the sensation perfectly. He defeated Charles Leclerc on the track, on his favorite track, and thus Leclerc once again failed to convert pole position into a victory in Baku. This is the fourth time he started from pole. The conditions have never been more favorable, but today it didn't work out again. In the first stint, things looked pretty good. He started well from pole, he led the race. Piastri was able to stay close in the first few laps. He also stayed within the DRS window. He kept getting close again. He didn't become really dangerous. After 5 laps, Piastri had to let go a bit. It was clear that in the dirty air, his tires were being worked harder. He couldn't keep up with Leclerc's pace. At the end of the first stint, Piastri was already 6 seconds behind Leclerc. What happened next? This is the crucial phase of the race. Sergio Perez held his ground at the front. He initiated the pit stops on lap 13. Things got really interesting then. He entered traffic. This caused delays in the following pit stops. He didn't just hit traffic, he found himself behind Lando Norris. Now we've talked so much about team orders at McLaren, how Piastri has to drive for Lando Norris. Now Norris had to drive for Piastri. He was on a different strategy, starting from the back on hard tires in the first stint. He was meant to slow down Perez for Piastri, so he couldn't make the undercut. Norris did this excellently. In the end, Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, even told us that 50% of Piastri's victory is credited to Norris because he left Perez behind. He cost him a lot of time. This allowed Piastri to stay out for 2 more laps, completing his stop on lap 15. Then a lap later, Charles Leclerc came in. At this point, I'll repeat, Piastri was 6 seconds behind the Ferrari driver. Then a lap later, Leclerc came out of the pits. Ferrari thought Albon was 2 seconds behind on hard tires. Piastri was behind him, but that wasn't true. Albon was right behind Leclerc. At the end of the lap, Piastri was right behind Leclerc. Now the question is, how did this happen? This was Ferrari's first major mistake. They underestimated the undercut in Azerbaijan. They thought the hard tires would need a long time to get up to temperature. But Piastri managed it immediately, exiting the pits and completing an outlap that was 3 seconds faster than Leclerc's. So it was a huge mistake by Ferrari to wait too long. They lost a significant lead over Leclerc. However, he was initially still ahead. By lap 20, Piastri made his move. At the end of the long start-finish straight, he passed Leclerc by surprise. Leclerc said it wasn't that surprising. He was slightly offset, not in my slipstream. I could see him in the mirror. And still, Leclerc didn't resist much. That was likely the greatest error in this race, and Leclerc later acknowledged it as well. He figured, fine, I'll just let Piastri go by now. He'll overtake him again regardless. He thought he had the better pace. He believed it would only take a bit for his hard tires to be in the window, and then he'd pass me again. We all know it didn't work out. But we must not forget how amazing that overtaking maneuver by Oscar Piastri against Charles Leclerc was super late on the brakes. Piastri stated that he wasn't quite sure if it would still succeed, if he would be able to navigate the curve. He thought it was a 50-50 chance. Andrea Stella even said, no, he thought he would just go far into the runoff area and wouldn't make the turn. He actually managed it. Honestly, if you check the speed graphs, you'll notice how late he was on the brakes. He still took the curve quite well, so it was an absolute sensational move by Piastri at that moment. After a sensational outlap and a sensational inlap. So those were the decisive rounds for the Australian. And then, as you know, Charles Leclerc couldn't turn it around anymore. He certainly kicked himself afterward for not putting up more of a fight. He also mentioned that he struggled more with the hard tires than with the medium tires in the first stint. That was likely only half the truth. Fred Vasseur, the Ferrari team principal, didn't really believe that. He thinks it's more about being in dirty air and not being able to drive in clean air. Leclerc noted that he underestimated the McLaren's top speed. McLaren was more about top speed, while Ferrari focused on cornering speed. Actually, There wasn't a major difference. In fact, when you check the stats, Leclerc was even faster at the measurement points. It was likely just Piastri's late braking point that Leclerc didn't feel he could copy later. Piastri defended himself very well. He consistently covered the inside line, and that's what Leclerc didn't do in the important lap. We closely examined the times to see how close Piastri was to Leclerc at the finish line during the overtaking maneuver and how close Leclerc was later. Actually, there were a few laps where Leclerc was even closer and had a larger speed surplus. But Piastri covered the inside, so Leclerc couldn't do anything. That's why I believe Leclerc may be the quicker driver, but Piastri, the better one, performed exceptionally well. Ultimately, Leclerc's tires broke down. Yes, this was probably because he was pushing hard the entire time. It was an epic fight, especially how they drifted out of turn 16. It reminded me of the 1980s in Formula One. It was sensational, and we must say, we can be glad that overtaking isn't too easy in Formula One, or else the faster driver would have just passed and likely pulled away, just as it was in the first part. In any case, it was a thrilling race. We got 50 laps of the best action. And in the last 2 laps, we had more action because Leclerc's tires broke down in dirty air. He then closed in on Sergio Perez, who also had a fantastic race and might have even won. Christian Horner, the Red Bull team boss, noted, and Perez himself said that if he had just gotten by Piastri, but I explained it to you earlier, Norris was holding him up. As Leclerc's tires were wearing out, Perez could really apply pressure again, wanting to overtake the Ferrari driver, but he didn't quite succeed, and then someone approached from behind. Because the front wasn't fast anymore, Carlos Sainz was also there. And indeed, on lap 50, it occurred. Sainz and Perez collided quite forcefully at the exit of corner 2. At that point, the two were still a meter apart, and Perez later told us that it particularly bothered him, as there were meters between them in turn 2 or just after turn 2, and just a few meters later. So they were tangled together, and just a few meters later, they crashed into the wall. Is there a question of blame? It's complicated. Is Carlos Sainz a bit too far over towards Sergio Perez? Or is Perez too far over towards Carlos Sainz? And the two got tangled up, veered left, resulting in a serious crash. The race was over for both. Yes, of course, the two camps saw it differently. Christian Horner said he would be disappointed if Sainz didn't receive a grid penalty for the next race in Singapore. On the other hand, it was said that Sainz was driving the normal racing line, which is what drivers always do. You drive a little bit away from the barrier at that point. Moreover, Leclerc was ahead of him. He was trying to stay in the slipstream. Sergio Perez confirmed this, saying he saw Sainz wanted to stay in the slipstream. But wait, I'm right there. What did the stewards say? They noted that no driver really moved into the other's path. Ultimately, it was a harsh racing incident, and both had to deal with it. I'm curious how you view this. Interestingly, they've clashed several times before. During this weekend's practice sessions, they got in each other's way. There were a few dangerous moments, but no contact. Then, in the race, after the Singapore Grand Prix, Formula One enters its 3-week autumn break. But that certainly doesn't mean you'll be without racing for that long. In fact, the DTM is coming to our, and hopefully your doorstep. From September 22nd to 29th, the DTM will be at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg, and it's going to be action-packed. It will be a red-white-red spectacle featuring Lucas Auer, Thomas Preining, and Clemens Schmiel. 3 local matadors are starting. The championship is also heating up. The title fight is heating up among Calvin van der Linde, Mirko Bortolotti, and Mario Engel. It's the penultimate race weekend of the 2024 DTM season. You can enjoy it live at DTM's typical family-friendly ticket prices, and importantly, each ticket, regardless of category, also gives access to the paddock. But one has to ask, when do you have time for the paddock with all the action on the track? In addition to the DTM, there are also support series, including the ADAC GT Masters and the Porsche Carrera Cup Germany. And as if that weren't enough, there's also a fan zone. There's plenty of entertainment for the little ones and the grown-ups too. An event stage featuring a DJ is available, and you can certainly get autographs at Meet the Drivers, where the DTM stars will be there in person. Tickets can be found at www.redbullring.com. Enjoy your time at the ring. Now let's get back to Formula One, back to the spectacular race in Baku. This crash allowed George Russell to reach the podium like a virgin to a child. And naturally, everyone else has moved up, including Lando Norris in 4th place. We must remember he started from 15th and benefited from 2 rule breaches. Gasly was pushed back and had to start from the pit lane after his disqualification. Hamilton also had to change his engine and start from the pit lane. For that reason, he gained 2 positions, but he still started 9 spots behind Max Verstappen. Ultimately, he crossed the finish line 1 place ahead of Verstappen. This means he gained 3 more points in the Drivers' Championship against Verstappen. Still, he is 59 points behind the current world champion. For Verstappen, it was a mixed feeling. On one hand, he could be satisfied he didn't lose more. At the start of the weekend, it seemed a bit off. Conversely, it's tough to start 9 places ahead of his fiercest title rival and then finish 1 spot behind him. Lando Norris still had his reservations. This was the best result he could achieve. He did well at the race's end. However, he remained troubled by the yellow flag, stating it was unfair. Team leader Andrea Steller has accepted it. He acknowledged that he understands the reason for the yellow flag. However, that's another topic. Let's return to the race. Max Verstappen said it wasn't surprising that Norris ended up ahead of him. 2 factors really turned his race into a worst-case scenario. First, the setup. We talked about this yesterday after qualifying. They miscalculated. They actually had a pretty good car. After the 3rd practice, he wanted to improve the good car even more. He then went 1 step too far and completely messed up the setup. You all know that how you enter qualifying is how you go into the race for more regulation. Thus, no miracles were expected. It was the same for Verstappen. At least he managed to get past Russell at the start. However, after the first stop, he came out behind Albon and Norris, who were on different strategies and had started on hard tires. Verstappen couldn't get past either of them. That really ruined his race. As a result, Russell also managed to get by. Later, Norris made a pit stop. He quickly caught up to Verstappen on fresh medium tires and was able to overtake him. This explains the whole situation. It's particularly bitter for Max Verstappen because he would have only lost 1 point to Norris if there hadn't been the crash involving Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz, because that was the situation. This occurred in the 50th lap. That means there were still laps 51 and 52 left. Verstappen was overtaken by Norris on lap 50. He was then able to pit immediately after for a free pit stop. He didn't lose any positions and of course wanted to set the fastest lap on the last lap. That lap was held by Lando Norris until then and remained so at the end. The issue was that then there was the crash. First a yellow flag came out, then there was a VSC. Max Verstappen couldn't achieve the fastest lap anymore, so instead of earning the extra point himself, Norris got it. Therefore, he only lost 1 point, but 2 points to his closest title rival. It was a tough situation for Max Verstappen. Still, he feels a bit fortunate as he only lost 3 points this weekend. Sergio Perez demonstrated that with this Red Bull and the new floor, if the setup is correct, they can indeed fight for victories again. Yes, we just talked about it. In the end, there was a yellow flag and a VSC following a heavy crash. Now you might be asking, wait, if the crash was that serious, why was there just a yellow flag? Why was there only a VSC? This question is on your minds and the drivers as well. George Russell, the GPDA president, had strong criticism about this. He mentioned that he just crashed into a wall of carbon and dust. Additionally, the sun was low. He couldn't see a thing. He was surprised that the race control didn't immediately deploy the safety car. He wasn't the only one feeling this way. The drivers unanimously stated that there should have been an immediate safety car. However, that didn't happen. Why? Some even claimed there should have been a red flag. A red flag would have led to a race interruption. That wasn't needed. It was relatively safe to drive by the accident scene, even with debris present. It was clear the race wouldn't continue anyway. This means that even if someone experienced a tire failure, they wouldn't be able to race at speed afterward. So the red flag wasn't absolutely necessary. Now one could argue that a safety car wasn't strictly necessary either. By the time all drivers caught up to the safety car, they would have already been at VSC speed. Because until I catch the safety car, I can't go full speed. I have to stick to the VSC times, so it wouldn't have changed much and a restart shouldn't happen anyway, so it wasn't a completely wrong decision. If there was a wrong decision, it was that it took a very long time to declare the VSC phase. Initially, they were just very long double yellows, and only then was the VSC called. And this was tricky because some drivers went by the spot under double yellow. Nico Hülkenberg was particularly unlucky. He lost 2 positions because of it. He drove through under double yellow, let off the gas, thinking a red flag or safety car, or at least a VSC, would come. But it didn't happen. Then a green pendulum actually came up behind him, and he shifted a bit late. Lewis Hamilton was right behind him, shifted in time, and passed him on the inside. Ollie Behrman also slipped through. Quite bitter for Hülkenberg, as he had just made a mistake and lost the position to Colapinto. He could have definitely scored big points. Nico Hülkenberg's own mistakes, along with a bit of bad luck in this yellow phase, and perhaps not completely fair from Hamilton and Behrman when viewed this way, because really, when they both took off, he was still under yellow, but it was unfortunate. The race control will definitely need to explain itself at the next driver briefing in Singapore, as there was a lot of criticism. On one hand, it's valid because the VSC phase probably arrived too late. On the other hand, well, it wouldn't have been much different if there had been a safety car instead of a VSC. Now I'm looking forward to your opinions concerning the race control, and especially your questions for Christian Danner, since we have, as always, after the race weekend, the AVD Motorsport magazine featuring our expert Christian Danner. If you have a question, leave it in the comments under the hashtag AskAVD.